Hello and welcome to the Preamble. My name is Burlokk. With me is Grumsworth, and today we'll be talking about batch painting. Yeah, batch painting. I thought it'd be an interesting topic for us to wrestle with this day. What do you reckon?
Sounds a good move. I like a good
Yeah.
wrestle with a topic.
Yeah, me too. So batch painting, it got me thinking about batch painting when I was doing some hobby this week, painting up some primary Space Marines, and I thought to myself, well, what am I actually doing here? Am I painting a load of individual characters? Am I painting a squad? Maybe I'm batch painting. I think I am. And I think for me, like batch painting is just that. You're painting in stages, aren't you? Really, it's in batches. Would you agree?
I would totally agree with that. It is, as the name suggests, it's when you grab a big old chunk of models. Doesn't have to be big, I suppose. As you say, you're doing your 5 Primaris Marines and you're working through them in a batch.
Yeah, stage by stage. Yeah.
The ability to get a group of models and get them painted up to a uniform standard all at the same time, all in the same level of progress. So eventually you're going to finish up with a whole host of finished models, all kind of roughly the same. Really good for regiments, squads, all
about the
that
same
sort of
time.
thing, isn't it? About the
Yeah.
same time, yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about it, how many miniatures do you have to have in front of you to call it batch painting? I mean, it's argued that you could have just more than one, but I think, it's better to think of it if you're dealing with squads or units of miniatures that you're painting, because you can achieve the results on that psychologically and physically, in a much better way. If you're painting just 2 models, you could quite conceivably be painting them as if they were character figures. Start one, finish one, start the next one, finish the next one. Time-wise, you'll probably be looking at about the same. But I think, when you have a unit of 5 to 10, maybe even 20 or 30 strong, you're going to need to adopt the method of batch painting to be able to get you over that hump, aren't you?
That's right, yeah. Assume the batch painting posture.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
That's what
assume the position.
This is exactly, assume the position. This is our fine advice. I think we've both done copious amounts of batch painting in our day, haven't we, Burlokk?
Yeah.
We've used the technique, the process to get ready squads right the way through to entire armies, I suppose. Batch painting, you can really go sort of full on steel in your veins sort of affair and attempt to paint an army, maybe batch paint it in a month or something like this.
It has been done by some of our erstwhile colleagues on YouTube. I think some good content creators out there have got some fantastic work on, challenging themselves to paint a huge amount of miniatures in one
like
go.
a weekend or something like that.
Yeah, something crazy. But undoubtedly doable, provided you adopt a certain level of techniques and I think expectations.
Managing your expectations.
Yeah.
When you're painting vast amounts, even managing your expectations to paint 5, I think it's really useful because you're going to stop yourself getting burnt out. Got a bit of a plan of action going, and batch painting really fits in nicely with that because you're setting yourself up with the sort of code of practice that will see you to the end of the line.
That's right. And for me, painting these sorts of projects is a psychological battle, basically right the way through. I mean, it always is. And
it's part of the joy of it, though.
Well, of course it is, yeah. And it's sort of defeating that process and getting to the end of it and winning. That's like, yes, winning. I got there. I've done it. I've won. I've painted this squad. But I've tried it both ways. I've tried both the batch painting method and painting each miniature individually from start to finish, and it certainly both has their place. When you're painting stuff to sort of a competition standard, to your best level, perhaps doing each one individually might be better off. Certainly with some of the Necromunda miniatures that you've painted, there was a sort of an element of batch painting you've rolled into some of them. But you broke it down into much smaller segments, 2 or 3 at a time, as opposed to the whole thing, because you wanted to have a better, more polished finish rather than having a massive army of, say, 50, 60 soldiers all painted to the same. You're going to get better results if you break it down into smaller segments, certainly.
You are. And with that particular task, although there was some uniformity among the style and their equipment and things like this, they were essentially 10 individual characters. I did. I painted them in small batches of 3.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I remember
because
you saying.
kind of it split it up. I got a good mix between speed of getting them done, but also a high level of individual detail in between groups of 3. So
Yeah.
with a band such as they are of 10, that kind of worked out quite neatly.
The other way of doing things, if you're doing a squad of 10 primary Marines, for example, in my experience, doing one from start to finish, and then the second one start to finish, it's like you're starting a new project all over again.
Yeah, it's
you can
slow
get,
going, isn't it?
It can be much slower going, and with that you can lose a bit of enthusiasm. You can go off the boil a little bit, and it becomes more of a chore. And I've had it myself, where I've done a first Space Marine or Primaris Marine or whatever I'm painting, an Orc boy, start to finish. It looks fantastic, and I think, okay, I've got to do another one start to finish now, and I feel like I've got to get back into that zone again to begin something new, to see something through to the end.
Yeah.
So if I'm batch painting, I never get to that point of, I don't never reach that crash before I have to bring myself back up again. I keep it constantly on the upscale, if you know what I mean. It's constantly like I'm getting one set of colors done, followed by another set of colors, and then at the end, once they're all done, all the colors are finished, then the unit is then complete, and then that sense of completion is there, and it's much greater, I feel, than having having that up and down of getting one model finished, a second model finished, a third model finished. It can be a lot harder going.
Yeah, suddenly the reward is there when finally you cross the finish line and stood before you are your 10, 15, 20 whole army's worth of miniatures, all painted to the same standard, all ready for action, ready for you to take to the tabletop.
That's right.
So I think it is a really helpful tool psychologically. It helps you get through a large, chunky project. I would say this is a useful technique for the majority of people, because I think this is a little bit how we work in miniature painting. There are definitely people out there, I'm sure, that will take their 10 tactical Marines and paint each one top to toe, start to finish completely before moving on to the next one. But I reckon they're probably in the minority.
I've known people to do that. I used to work with
a guy. I have, yeah.
He had a fantastic looking Dark Elder army, and he, or Drukhari as they're called now, is that right? And he was an advocate for painting a single model every 2 days from start to finish.
All right. Yeah.
And of course, the quality of his models was incredible. It looked
very
really,
high,
really
I'm sure.
And every other day, he'd have another miniature on the table, and before you knew it, wow, he had an entire army on there. But the downside that he said to me was that I can never bring a fully painted army to the field until they're all done.
Yeah. So
whereas if he was batch painting, it'd be different, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. If you're cranking out a individual model every 2 days, you're going to be looking at getting your relatively sort of medium-sized army onto the table maybe a year after you begin painting, aren't you?
Yeah.
Whereas if you're painting your miniatures in batches, you can get it together in a much more timely fashion.
Yeah.
Can't you?
Yeah, I think so. I guess it gives your miniatures a sense of uniformity, doesn't it? As well.
It does.
And it doesn't just give you that psychological win there and then. It gives your army a different feel. I think one thing you mentioned to me the other day is that you managed to get all of your Necron warriors that you've been working on recently out as a squad of 10, and you only needed to mix up one lot of paint.
Yeah, that's kind of working in an efficient way as well. So all of their green glow was done in one sitting. I sat down, I thought, I've got a couple of hours here, hobby time, that I can get in. I'm going to bring all of their glowing parts up to the same standard using the same colors. I could see that another little part of the entire unit was completed at the end of that 2 hours. I only had to mix up one little wet pallet's worth of paint for that. So you're kind of cutting down on wastage there as well.
Yeah,
of
course.
But because the green is a mix of medium as well, it was useful to get it mixed up like that and lay it all down in that one sitting, so it has that uniformity that we've been speaking of. So all of their green glowing weapons, being Necrons as they are, their equipment is identical to each other's. And so the paint job should, to my mind, reflect that as well. So it's really useful for painting units, squads that you want to keep looking uniform, not just in their colours or the application, but the way that army, that squad looks. But it's also really efficient time-wise. To get something done, to get that one piece locked in, then you can move on to the next. It's almost like it gives you a little bit of a battle plan. It's like we start here, so I'm going to whack on all of the black areas of this model, and then you move on to the next one, the next one, the next one, and before you know it, the whole unit has all of that particular piece of equipment, shading, armor, flesh tone, whatever, locked in. And then it kind of informs your decision as to where to go next. And you see the whole unit coming together rather than an individual. It's sometimes good to do a test model.
Yeah, I think that's vital in some occasions because it gives you an idea. As you said, it gives you your battle plan. And we spoke on numerous different episodes about planning your job first and how much easier it makes that process. Yeah, for it'd be nice just to jump straight in and just go wild and see what comes out at the other end.
But sometimes it is.
Sometimes that can work, but that way lies dragons. So be prepared to fight them off. If you do that. Planning it out, yes, having your test model, that can work. However, if you know sort of the colors you'll be using, you know the alchemy that you're going to be putting into place for them, you know the order which we're going to be painting some of those bits in, and you can then order that into a series of batches. So let's use the Silver Templars that I've been working on recently. You've got the silver armor, that was all done. They were all got to that stage. Then that was all shaded and highlighted. The armor was finished and completed. At that point, they looked like they were ready to be fielded almost because, the majority of a Marine's armor is Marine's miniature is just his armor.
Yeah.
So if I'd have just blacked out some of the weapons and some of the details, thrown on a color on the base, I could have used them on the battlefield.
Take them to the table. Yeah.
At that point, I can then use them. So it gives you an instant squad of 5 that you can then field very early on.
Yeah. So it gets your miniatures to the table quicker as well.
As a squad, as opposed to a single Marine. Yeah. So
and not a half finished one. So you haven't got 5 Marines wandering onto the the grim dark battlefields of the 41st millennium there.
Yeah.
With only one of them with his eyes painted, or one of them with his hazard strike chainsword, and the rest all in white.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've played games with guys before now, a series of games, like we've played a campaign before, a little bit like the old Tale of Four Gamers in a way.
The hallowed tale.
If you can cast your mind back that far, Grumsworth, to the pages of White Dwarf, where the staff, the editorial team of White Dwarf challenged themselves to the Tale of Four Gamers, where they would each choose an army, and they would each month play a game which gets bigger and bigger with each passing month because they've painted more added to their army.
Yeah.
Well, I've done a similar kind of thing before now, and I've seen a friend's army. He's fielded a unit, and he'd got all the base coats down on them. They looked fine. He'd got a couple of other units down there, at varying levels of painting. And the next time we played, he'd got them all done to the next level almost. And then the time after that, he'd got them to the level after that. And then by the time we played our 4th game, his whole army was painted and it looked beautiful. It'd been based and everything. And you could really see the progression. But nonetheless, at each stage of the games that we played, they were looking good and you were seeing that progress, but they were coming together as a whole army. It wasn't like he had a sea of grey plastic miniatures, and every now and again when we'd play another game, he'd have another couple more completely painted. No, they'd all be brought up to the same level at the same time. And that's because he was adopting the idea of batch painting. Some people call it conveyor belting, I suppose, in a way, where you have every model on a conveyor, and you do each color. And, by the time you get to the last model, the first one's dry, so you can begin then on the next color.
Which again, that is that sort of baked in efficiency with time and materials again, isn't it? Because as you say, you get to that 10th model, and the paint on the first one has dried. So there's no waiting, there's no pausing in between that. You can just go in and lay the next colour on the next one. I think it does go back to, I think the conveyor belt kind of idea, visualization is really helpful for it as well.
I think so as well. It can give you a sort of an idea that you're knocking them out quick, or these are a bit subpar. But again, that comes back to your expectations that we mentioned earlier.
It does,
You need to be able to rein them in a little bit, because if you painted every single model from start to finish individually, you'll have individually amazing looking miniatures. It'll just come together a whole lot slower. And as you know, we like our hobbies to come together somewhat quickly. If we're playing games especially, we like to use painted miniatures.
Batch painting can be useful to complete an individual unit, add a new one to your army. You say that there is like a drop off of quality in doing this, but also it's like you can just slap them back on the conveyor belt a month later. So
you can always go back to them.
They can be on the board really rapidly in a 3-color minimum. And then when you get the time, put them back on your conveyor belt and you whack in some more of the deeper detail, or you add another layer of highlights. Or a bit more texture to all of their bases. While it's nice to see things coming together en masse, you don't get that immediate result of how the unit is going to look. If you've spent the last 5 hours putting down just all the blue base coat on a load of ultramarines, you look back at your 5 hours spent and you've just got a load of like blue
sea of blue
guys. And not the sort that you're wanting to look at, the sea of blue, resplendent, beautifully painted ultramarines. You just got a load of basic blue figures. And in the early stages of batch painting, that can be quite disheartening, can't it?
It can be, and it goes back to that psychological battle you're waging from start to finish with these things. So, and as you said earlier, some people really do enjoy getting a single model done, finishing off and moving on to the next one, because it does give them that constant drip feed of gratification. I've got one done, that looks great.
That's right.
To the next one, I've got that one done. But I find that the batch painting, not only can you achieve good quality, albeit at a drawn out over a longer period of time, and you have to put up with an unfinished unit or squad or individual character for that much longer. I think the end result speaks for itself, and you can always, as you say, put them back on the conveyor and start, or even once they've got their 3-color minimum, you could then individually pick each one up and bring each one individually up to a final standard. Because by that point, you've already got a finished squad that you can field on the battlefield and use when you're playing games with your friends. So there are certainly its advantages and its disadvantages to batch painting, but I feel as though the advantages outweigh the disadvantages.
They far outweigh them.
But only in instances where I think you need to use batch painting. I mean, I guess a large project would lend itself to batch painting, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but the idea you can crunch the batch down to a small number, like I did with the Caldor gang, and also like I did with some Wrath of Kings miniatures, some pigmen. So batch painting to get these guys out the door and looking to a level where I was happy to play with them. The conveyor belt really, really helped with these guys. The majority of the work was done with an airbrush, which is super speedy anyway, but also almost all of the colors have a soft blending transition between them. And this is achieved by throwing a little bit of, I've got dark blue on these guys. So started out with a black undercoat, whacked on with the airbrush, a nice dark purple blue. And then I slowly added a little bit of a lighter blue and a little bit of a lighter blue, and then a little bit of white into the mix. And to get this uniform and even among all 6 of these guys, I had to do it in that one sitting. But at the end of it, I was faced with, as I just said with the Ultramarines there, I was faced with just a load of blue, which didn't really, blue pigment. But the next day I went back and I painted all the skin in, locked all that in. So again, that was uniform. It was even across all of them. They're a squad there. While they're posed differently, they are essentially identical models.
Yeah, and I guess another instance where you may use batch painting to your advantage is if you're on a deadline. I can cast my mind back to a previous episode again where you spoke about your, is it Drop Fleet Commander? Drop Zone Commander?
They were batch painted.
Well, didn't you do a few of them the day before the tournament was on, when you were on your way to a tournament?
Yeah, I did a mini batch of 4.
Yeah, a mini batch of 4 of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, in the Travel Lodge the day before. But it was because I had the conveyor belt idea already locked in mind. It was exactly the same paint treatment that was being used on these 4 models. that I'd used throughout the entire army. I just took my small selection of paints, sponges and brushes along, because I actually sponged on a lot of the colour for those guys. They went up in stages. So even if I fell to slumber or drunkenness or just defeated by the task, I could take them to the tournament the next day, maybe all three, and they would be uniform and they would colour match the rest of the army.
Even if it was just the base coats that you'd managed to lay down in the time you had. Yeah, because you'd have brought them all up to the same level at the same time. And that's isn't it? It's you can build them up to different levels as and when you see fit. You can bring them all up to a particular standard and be happy with them there. Yeah. And then in a week or a month or however long you want to leave it, bring them up to your next level of painting. Yeah. As and when you're ready to. But I think keeping yourself in that batch painting mode when you've got a particular project on, from seeing it through from start to finish, seeing them go from grey plastic, they all go through every level at the same time. You bring that whole unit together, and there's nothing like it when you cross that finish line, is there?
Definitely, yeah. And it's also kind of nice if you're into taking pictures of your miniatures, which now we've all got a phone with a camera in our pocket. Easily done. You can document your progress with that whole unit or squad or group of 5 guys or whatever.
Yeah. So if you just plug a tag into Instagram, for example, or just plug in their miniatures work in progress.
That's something. Right. Yeah.
You'll get so many examples of what people have done. Yeah. What stage their particular project has got to, because it's easy to do that, isn't it? You can document it as you go and use that as your own learning experience. I think you can learn from previous attempts or what colors work well at speed, and again, that comes back down to the planning, I think, but also knowing your colors, knowing your color schemes. And putting that all into practice in the same way. And I like the idea that you brought up earlier about it not being particularly wasteful of paint, because I don't like waste at the best of times. So when it comes to
of course not
just filling up my palette that one time with that one color and using that until it's used up, rather than let it sit there and go dry and be thrown away, it's best to get as much out of your paint. And as a hobby, it's not cheap, is it? Let's be fair.
It's not. If you're using that circa 1995 Goblin Green,
always,
you do not want to be using a drop more of that stuff than you have to, do you? When you're painting those Goblin Green bases, that stuff's going in the fridge straight after.
Oh, of course, yeah. Keep it in good order, right? Yeah, it's next to my Sunburst Yellow, so I can easily just fibre roast the sun.
That's right.
So
little basing technique from the mid-90s for you there, folks.
There you go. But I mean, other projects I've used batch painting on recently has been for my squats. I mean, fortunately, the army list that I've chosen to use is from the 2nd edition 40k lists, and they come in squads of 5, which makes it really useful, because I can do an entire squad, which I won't ever need to add anything to.
Yeah.
I just choose the 5 that I want to paint. Right, that's that one squad. Get them all done.
Yeah.
And I can vary the colours from squad to squad if I wanted to. Rather than having sort of some green padded jerkins on them, I could use the sort of brown padding or red padding, whatever I might want to. And so it just allows me to batch that whole squad. They'll get completed to their own level, their own standard, to their own slight variation of the colour scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll all get done at the same time and finished and looking lovely, I'm sure.
It's also really good for their bases. That's something that has irked me in the past, both with my own work and seeing other people's. An army is always going to, or any group of miniatures is always going to look better if the basing is done in a uniform or at least super similar fashion.
Yeah.
It's no good having 5 Marines walking forward, I think anyway, on a Goblin Green and Sunburst Yellow base, and the rest of the army is all on some sort of Stirland mud mix, something like this.
Uniformity.
Having uniformity throughout your bases really ties in the army, and it makes it a more smarter, more finished looking piece of work.
That's right. And even if there are very minor variations in the colours that you've chosen to use for your bases, if you've gone for, say, a mixed colour, just to get the colour exactly right to match a piece of scenery you might have, or to match an idea you've got in your mind, or to match it to an image you've drawn from some external inspiration, going back to, again, another episode that we spoke about many weeks ago, it allows you to at least get a complete unit done to all the same standard. If the next unit has that same kind of brown, but it's very slightly different, at least all that 10 or that 20 are done to that same standard.
That's right, yeah.
As a whole group, they will blend nicely. Although saying that, I have known people to do an entire army without touching a single base.
Yeah, and then just do the bases all at the end, right?
And then do all the bases at the end. But then I guess the temptation there, isn't it, is you want to get a unit completed from start to finish and have it look ready to display at least while the rest of your army comes together. But it's something you can do, isn't it?
It is something you can do, and you are essentially you're batch painting the bases as a last piece, aren't you?
Yeah, because it is kind of a separate part of the model entirely. Yes, that you should consider the environment they're fighting over, and
consider it.
These Silver Templars that I'm working on, they're going to be on a like a mangrove forest, swampy kind of thing. So how that's going to gel with the silver and the yellow, I'm going to have to be quite careful about the palette I choose to use. So I'm going to make sure that I do all those bases in their own setting, in their own as their own session. You know what I mean? Just so that I can make sure they all look exactly right. You can do a test model. This is where using a test model I think is quite useful. You're going to batch paint. Whilst it will take you out of that batch painting mentality, it will help set up the rest of your army, won't it? By doing that test piece, getting the colors down, getting your mixes exactly right, but taking notes as you go, whether they just be scratched notes on a bit of paper or you're typing up on a computer as you go, really invaluable, because it just means that you won't quite forget, was that a 25 to 75 ratio of Sterling Mud to Agrax Earthshade, or was it the other way around? Because you do want it to be as uniform as you can, and make your process as efficient as possible.
It can help sort of work through periods of burnout as well.
Yeah, it can do. Yeah, and because that happens to everybody, which I'm sure we'll discuss on a future episode.
Yeah.
Because burnout is a big thing. It's a big old topic, actually. The more I think about it,
it is.
I mean, I don't know how you feel about a quick summary, really, just to say that really,
go on, throw it out
batch
there.
Painting here for us is really efficiency, time saving, speed, uniformity, and I think above all consistency.
And the psychological benefit of being able to complete whole units, whole boxes of miniatures removed from your pile of cellophane wrapped shame.
That's it, yeah.
Thanks so much for tuning in, folks. Those are our thoughts on batch painting. Perhaps they've been useful to you. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Use our code in the notes for 10% off everything bought at roguesgaming.com. It helps us out a little bit. As old Father Time, he calls for his quote.
Oh, well, who offers the words of payment this day?
I shall offer up the words of payment to dear old Father Time. Every time I look into a monitor prime, my circuits sizzle. When are we gonna start busting Deceptor chops? Pretty accurate. You've been listening to The Preamble. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, and many other podcast platforms. If you want to contact us, just send an email to thepreamble@gmail.com or find us at The Preamble on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Your hosts were Grumsworth and Burlokk, brought to you by roguesgaming.com.